What's up everyone, Darcblade here, returning with another Mass Effect 3 multiplayer class guide. Today we are going to be taking a look at a Rebellion DLC character, the Vorcha Sentinel. Now I've put off covering the Vorchas so far because they didn't really appeal to me, but if you look past the physical appearance of the Vorcha Sentinel, you'll actually find out that he is a very powerful class. Now like all my characters in the game, I spec them for the harder difficulties. For the Vorcha Sentinel, I put maximum points into Bloodlust. This is a unique ability only available to the Vorchas. I put points into health regeneration over movement and melee, simply because I'm not really going to be using this guy as a melee character, and his movement speed increase is already sufficient enough, and the health regeneration is more beneficial and helps you survive longer. I put points into power damage over weapon damage simply because I feel that I'll be doing more damage with my flamer and cluster grenades than I would my weaponry. And finally I put points into health regeneration over melee damage because I want the survivability of health regeneration. I put maximum points into flamer, putting points into armor damage over shield damage. This is because there are more harder opponents with armor than there are shields. I put points into damage over duration because I want Flamer to be doing a lot of damage, and sometimes duration is more detrimental to the Vorcha Sentinel. And finally I put points into reach over damage. This is because Flamer is a very short ranged move, and at least with points in reach you can hit things at a medium distance. I put maximum points into cluster grenades. Now I put maximum points in this to allow the fire explosions to do the most possible damage they can. Now remember, I'm going for the cluster grenades to activate the fire explosions rather than do damage themselves. So I put points into shrapnel to help me hit more opponents over damage and force. I put points into max grenades over damage combo. However, if I did play with a team of regular biotic users, then I would probably choose damage combo. And finally, I put points into radius over force and damage. This is because cluster grenades are quite inaccurate, and having points in radius really does help with this problem. As for the passive abilities of the Vorcha Sentinel, Vorcha Resilience and Fitness, I went up to rank 4 in both of these. If you wanted to, you could potentially take points out of Vorcha Resilience to max out your Fitness, or if you're feeling confident enough, take points out of Fitness and put more into Vorcha Resilience. As for weaponry, to be honest, this guy can use pretty much any weapon. You just don't want to weigh yourself down too much with heavy weapons. I personally like to go with a shotgun or a pistol. As for the gear bonus slot, I personally like to use anything that increases my grenade capacity, as I will be using a lot of cluster grenades to set off fire explosions with the Vorcha Sentinel. Anyway, let's get into the heart of the episode and talk about the Vorcha Sentinel's moves and abilities. Its first move, a unique move only available to the Vorcha race, is Bloodlust. Basically, when you activate Bloodlust, the Vorcha flies into a frenzy, increasing his movement speed, health regeneration, and melee damage. The actual effect of Bloodlust can be intensified too, with each kill you get. This can stack up to 3 times. Unfortunately, you will lose these stacks after a short time, so you have to constantly kill people to maintain these stacks in order to get the most out of Bloodlust. Another downside about Bloodlust is that it slows down your power cooldown timer. So while you have Bloodlust activated, your Flamer cooldown timer will be longer than if you didn't have Bloodlust activated. Now the biggest benefit about Bloodlust is that it allows the Vorcha Sentinel to regenerate its health. Now not many classes can do this, and this gives the Vorcha Sentinel high survivability. This health regeneration can get to the point where even the Vorcha Sentinel can possibly tank. Unfortunately, if you want to do this, you need to probably max out Fitness, and you have to try to get the 3 stacks of Bloodlust going before you can start tanking the harder enemies in the game. With only your basic Bloodlust activated, you will still go down fairly quickly against enemy fire. You should also note that with Bloodlust, it's like tech armor, so once you activate it, it will stay on until you manually deactivate it. You can tell that Bloodlust is activated because the Vorcha Sentinel will have a red outline around him, and not only that, the outside of your screen, the outline of your screen, will have red effects all around it. The redness gets more brighter and more intense with each stack of Bloodlust that you gain. Anyway, let's move on and talk about the second ability available to the Vorcha Sentinel, which is Flamer. This is a very powerful move, and one of the best moves in the game when I think about it. The Vorcha Sentinel will fire from his Omni tool a plume of fire towards enemies. Unfortunately, this is quite short range, but as long as the flamer is going, enemies who are in the flame will continue and constantly take damage. On top of that, after the flamer is finished, enemies will continue to take damage thanks to the fact that flamer puts a damage over time on opponents. Flamer 2 can be manually cancelled as well, so if you're in a situation where you don't need to use the full flamer duration, or you need to get out of an area quick, then you press the flamer button a second time to cancel it. You should also note that flamer is incredibly effective against armoured opponents. Flamer can also be used to set up tech combos. The tech combo set up by flamer is Fire Explosion, and thanks to flamer affecting multiple opponents, you can set up multiple fire explosions. The Vorcha Sentinel can then follow up and activate these fire explosions with cluster grenades. The fact that you can set up and activate multiple fire explosions pretty much all at the same time makes this class very powerful indeed. There aren't really any downsides to the flamer ability. The only downside I can really think of off the top of my head is the fact that it just has very short range. But if you put the points into reach in the flamer talent tree, then you can pretty much hit anything that's at medium range as well as close range. If you're going for long range, then you're going to have to approach the targets completely different. Get yourself closer or use long range weaponry. A last note on flamer is that the flames from the flamer cannot be used to hit enemies through walls like some abilities can, like for example snap freeze. Now the third and final ability available to the Vorcha Sentinel is cluster grenades. Cluster grenades act the same way as any other grenade, except they split off into multiple shrapnel pieces. Basically they split. These grenades are also biotic, so they can be used to activate biotic explosions. But unfortunately the Vorcha Sentinel has no way to set up biotic explosions, thus these can only be used to set off your teammates' biotic explosions. But on the plus side, these can be used to activate your fire explosions set up by flamer. Now the damage for a cluster grenade is per grenade, so if for example when it splits, or the split sections of the cluster grenade hit an enemy, it will deal out a lot of damage. Now the best thing about cluster grenades is that because they split up into multiple grenade fragments, they can be used to activate multiple combos, biotic or tech, depending on what character has set up the combo. Now of course there are downsides because cluster grenades are a grenade, so they are in limited supply. You don't have a infinite amount of them, so you have to keep being aware of where ammo boxes are and constantly run into these to restock your grenade supply. You can increase your grenade supply with gear, which does help a lot with this character. The other downside about cluster grenades and the fact that they are grenades is that they can be a bit unwieldy. For example, throwing the grenades and trying to hit them on target can be a bit difficult, especially at longer ranges. What I find helps with cluster grenades is getting up close, or throwing it at the feet of opponents. The synergy between flamer and cluster grenades works quite well, and although flamer isn't a biotic setup move, it's a tech one, the fact that you can create and chain so many fire explosions really does mean that this character can do a lot of damage. The only real downside about these abilities is that they tend to prefer close quarters combat. Now, as for the passive abilities for the Vorcha Sentinel, with Vorcha Resilience you can increase your power damage and weapon damage, so on and so forth, like you can with any other character. I personally went for simply putting up to rank 4 in this tree, rank 4 being damage and capacity, to increase the power damage and force of the abilities for the Vorcha Sentinel. If you wanted to increase your power damage even further, you could put points into rank 5 power damage if you're willing to drop points in the fitness tree. As for fitness, I simply went up to rank 4, putting points into durability to increase my health and shields. Some players like to go up to rank 6 in fitness, putting points into martial artists and melee synergy, as Bloodlust gives you a melee damage bonus. But I feel that the Vorcha Sentinel is more optimal use in its flamer and cluster grenades, rather than relying on its melee capabilities. As for weaponry, there's two ways you can go really with this. You can either enhance your close range capabilities by equipping a shotgun or something. For example, the Riga Carbine is an excellent choice for the Vorcha Sentinel. The other option would be to equip something to attack at long range, like an assault rifle or pistol, or even a sniper rifle. This is because the Vorcha Sentinel really lacks long-range abilities. Now the Vorcha as a race are quite unique. There isn't really any other character like them. They have very, very low shields, but they have quite high health. Having high health really works great in unison with Bloodlust. The dodge mechanics for the Vorcha are quite good as well. It has a wonderful Vorcha pounce. This allows the Vorcha to leap forward, backward, side to side, and avoid a lot of incoming fire. It actually feels like a really good dodge move as the Vorcha gets on all fours to avoid attacks. The melee for the Vorcha is also quite good. Its heavy melee is another Vorcha pounce, where the Vorcha will leap towards enemies and slash at them with Omni-Tool claws. Its light melee is a continuous combo, where he just simply slashes away at opponents. Now, I know there are multiple builds for the Vorcha Sentinel out there, but this is the build that worked best for me. Overall, the Vorcha Sentinel to me is a very powerful class, despite the fact that I underestimated him at the start. Once you get used to his flamer and cluster grenades and use them to create devastating fire explosions, you will be dishing out a lot of damage. Lastly, if you're someone who loves close range combat, then you're going to absolutely love the Vorcha Sentinel. Anyway, I've been Darcblade, bringing you my Mass Effect 3 multiplayer class guide to the Vorcha Sentinel. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.